Hello, this is Finn Morrison with Fashion Worker Cooperatives. This is the second in a series of webinars we will have to educate people about converting their small business to a worker cooperative. And the secondary um, goal is to educate the advisors that they will need in that context to participate, to be their partners in that process, so that eventually I will be able to step back and let the process happening all by itself. In the first webinar, we talked about who is a good candidate for converting their small business to a worker cooperative, and the conclusion was that the size should be probably around 5 to 25 for now. Not that it couldn't be bigger, but that's where we are going to be concentrating our efforts for the time being. Today, we're going to be jumping into the 3 steps it takes to convert a worker cooperative, a small business to a worker cooperative. And we're going to be beginning with preparing the owner. So let me just switch to the slideshow we have here. I'm going to share my screen. Yes. So we're going to be talking about converting a small business to a worker cooperative. In particular, the professionals who are involved in that process. We talked about last time, we have a fellow named John Warrillow. He has written a book called Built to Sell, and he categorizes small businesses into 3 groups. The largest group is typically small business of just one person, and then probably more than half of workers are like that. And then the second group is small business owners who start a business in order not to have to get a job. And the smallest group are the people who start their business to sell it for profit. The graphic here is not really boxes like that, but it's a continuum, because there's the groups aren't defined that sharply. That you can see in the graphic here, they're more like continuums. So the ones we're working in are going to be in the orange group, the freedom fighters, basically, who have small businesses between 5 and 25 employees, and some of them are going to have difficulty selling to the normal ways that we'll talk about in another webinar later on. And the best candidates for them are their employees, because if they can't sell it at a premium, this is what they're all dreaming about, selling at a premium so they can retire. But reality is that they can only get fair market value at the most. And if they want to have that additional goal of preserving a legacy, then this is a great way to do it, because when just the small business owners who do sell their businesses, they will often see that the new owner changes everything and lays off all the workers, and that's not consistent with their values. So this is a much better way to do that. So the statistics, depending on where you look, but they are somewhere around these numbers, not exactly. It depends on who the investigator is and how they count their people. So it varies a bit around, but around 80% of all small business owners dream of selling their business within the next 10 years. And not all of them will, but they will try to do it. The other statistic is that 80% of people will tell you that if you wanna do something, there's a greater chance of success if you make a plan. However, only 15% of small business owners actually have a plan on how to exit. They would like to, most of them would like to exit, but they never have made a plan to do it, actually do it. The obvious thing is that all of them eventually will. 100% of small business owners will somehow exit from the business. So to do that, it is good to set some goals. That is part of the plan, making an exit plan. And it begins with yourself. What would you like your retirement to look like? Is it traveling? Is it sailing? Is it fishing? What are you planning to do with yourself when you're retired? And so many other things go into this. The first thing that you would expand the circle to not just you, but also your closest relatives, probably your wife or spouse. And then expand it even further to children. What are their plans? How do they fit into your plan? And some people will also include other stakeholders like in-laws. Sometimes have an interest in what's going to happen to your business. Your employees, if you care about that, some do. So there are many people involved who you might want to think about before you plunge into exiting your business. So there are basically 4 questions a business owner needs to answer to make a plan. One of the big ones is when do you want to exit? Because all the things that you're going to be doing in the meantime will play a role in how and when you're doing it. So it helps to need to know exactly when you're gonna exit. Sometimes your exit is involuntary and you'd have no control over it, and so if you have just a rudimentary plan from day 1 or day 2, then that will also help in that situation where you really don't have control over your exit. And another big one that you need to answer is, how are you going to live? How are you going to have enough money to buy food and housing, clothing when you're retired? Or so yeah, that's a big one, and that's most people will need to get some help from financial planners, estate planners, etc., to do that. And the third one is the one where most business owners fail the most. Business owners are special breed of people. They are go-getters. They take initiative. They can't sit still. So what many of them experience when they retire is that they have nothing to do. They have no purpose in their lives, and sometimes they even plunge into depression, even suicide sometimes. Or if they don't do that, they go ahead and start another business just like the one they just sold. So yeah, that wasn't really the purpose of exit planning. So be sure to have a plan for what you're doing afterward. And the fourth question is, who's going to take over? Many parents dream about keeping the business in the family for generations, and that's a nice plan, but reality is that it's become rare, more and more rare, for that to happen. And alternatively, they dream about, if that option is not available, they'll dream about selling their business to a third party for more than it's really worth, but that almost never happens anyway. So it pays to think about who you want to who's going to take over, and have a realistic plan for that. Because again, like we saw before, the steps that you're going to take to make it happen are different depending on who you plan to take it over when you leave. And we'll talk more about that later on when we get to value drivers. So with all that information, you should be able to build a plan that looks exactly like you want to do it in the best case scenario. So you shouldn't think about what is possible at this point. You should just make a plan the way you want it to be, if you could. And then after that, you can then figure out what is actually possible. And possibly, if there's a gap between what you want to do and what you are actually able to do, then you have some time to make some changes. If you were to decide that I want to sell my business tomorrow, there would be no time to make adjustments. So it's really important to get started early. So yeah, and then when you've done that, you can then create your plan. And once you've done that, you can implement your plan. So what we talked about before is the number one thing where most business owners fail is to extract yourself from the business emotionally, to make sure that you have an alternative to the business and have a purpose in your life. So, and the physically getting out of the business is to make sure that there is somebody who can take over after you, regardless of who that might be. And then financially, you need to have a way to provide for yourself when you're done. And that's the third part of that, the plan. So many business owners have dreams about what their business is worth, and most people don't actually know. They have not had a professional evaluation done, so they might go by some rule of thumbs or something they find on the internet, and they'll probably find that it has nothing to do with the actual value of the business, and they might end up with a gap. So if you, again, if you are too late in your business planning, business exit planning, you have no time to fill that gap if there is a gap. If you're starting early, then you can, there are lots of things you can do to meet that requirement. So that's where we're going to stop today. There are some other things we can do, and we'll talk about those later on. We'll just go right up to the last slide here so that you'll know how to contact me if you have any questions about what we just talked about today. Just leave that here for a minute, and then we'll meet some other time to talk about the other slides. Thank you for coming.